angry that we have a minimum wage of $7.25 an hour, which is a starvation wage. So there is a lot, in fact, to be angry about. But our job, as opposed to the Trump campaign, which also has a lot of anger, is what they are doing, what Trump is doing with the anger that he sees, is he is using it to scapegoat minorities. What he is doing is trying to divide us up. What he is doing is making outrageous statement that people from Mexico are criminals and rapists and are drug dealers. And he's telling us that Muslims should not be allowed to enter our country. And what we are saying, which is profoundly different, is that when we stand together as a people, black and white and Latino and Asian American, when we stand together, gay and straight, male and female, people born in this country and people who have come from another country, when we stand together, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. I want to make, which is clearly differentiates our campaign not only from Trump's but from every other campaign, is that I try to tell people the truth. That's a pretty radical idea nowadays. And here is the truth that no other candidate will tell you. And that is that no president, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can do what has to be done for the working families of this country alone. Can't be done alone. And I'll tell you why. I will tell you honestly why. The power of Wall Street, which has an endless supply of money, the power of corporate America, power of the corporate media, the power of large campaign donors are so strong that the only way we can stand up to them is when millions of people come together and stand up and say loudly and clearly that our government belongs to all of us, not just the 1%. And the point there is, and this I mean very sincerely, obviously I need your help in the next few days to help us win here in Iowa. I need your help to win the Democratic nomination. But here's the truth. I'm going to need your help the day after we get into the White House. The reason for that is everybody in this room knows, who has studied history, change never comes about from the top on down. It always comes about from the bottom on up. Trade union movement didn't start because a couple of guys on top thought it'd be a good idea for workers in this country to have collective bargaining. That's not how it happened. It happened because men and women fought, sometimes died, sometimes got beaten up, to say, you know what, workers in this country have the right to engage in collective bargaining. The civil rights movement did not happen because one day Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act. It happened because for decade after decade after decade, African Americans and their white allies said, you know what? We are going to end segregation. We are going to end racism. We're going to end the obscenity of Americans not being able to vote in this country because of the color of their skin. As everybody knows, women's rights did not happen because a few people on top thought that it made sense to end all kinds of discrimination against women. It happened because women and their male allies struggled. And women said, you know what, if we get a divorce, we are going to get some of the property. The man doesn't get it all. And they said, you know what, we are American citizens. We are going to have the right to vote. Very radical idea, I know, but they had to fight for that idea. Women said, you know what, if we want to be carpenters and electricians and truck drivers, we're going to do that work as well. That's how change happens. And I want to give you an example. And you're seeing it right now. If we were in this room 10 years ago and somebody jumped up and said, you know, I think gay marriage will be made legal in 50 states in this country in the year 2015, people would have said, you are nuts. All right? But it happened. And it happened because, again, the gay community and their straight allies said, in America, people should have the right to love the people they want to love. Let me give you just one more example. I've been out on picket lines for the last several years. I've done that for a long, long time. But in the last several years, I've been on a lot of picket lines with workers in the fast food industry. All right? And these are people who have gone out on strike, have demonstrated, and they said, you know what? We can't make it on $7.25 an hour or $8 an hour. And they said, we have got to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Now here's what's interesting. 3 or 4 years ago, if we were here and somebody said, you know, we should raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, people said, well, it's a great idea, but it's not practical. To quote one of my opponents, it's just not, you can't do it. You know, it's too high in the sky. But this is what's happened. Because workers went out on the street and they talked to their fellow Americans and they explained that you can't live on $7.25. I have talked to people. I was in Detroit a couple of years ago, I'll never forget this. Talked to some young people who were working in McDonald's, $7.25 an hour in Detroit. It was a couple of years ago. And they couldn't even get 40 hours a week. They got 20 hours a week and then they go to another place and another place in order to make a living. And what people said is that's wrong. And then what happened? Oh, up in Seattle, they raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour. In Los Angeles and San Francisco. And if I have anything to say about it, we're going to do it in Washington for 50 states. So my point is, and this is what American history is about, this is what politics is. Let me give you one more example, which you guys made happen. 8 years ago, all over this country, people said, an African American becoming president of the United States? You're nuts. That can't happen. Too much racism in America. And you think he is going to win in a very white state? Ain't going to happen. You made it happen. You made history. My point is that what history is about is not a few people on top coming up with clever ideas. It is when millions of people begin to stand up and say the status quo is not good enough. And as I go around this country, that's what I am sensing right now. And I'll tell you one area where I am sensing it very deeply, and that is the issue of income and wealth inequality. Who in America thinks that it is acceptable that today the top 1/10 of 1%, not 1%, 1/10 of 1% now owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%? Nobody thinks that this is what America should be about. Who thinks it makes sense that the 20 wealthiest people in this country now own more wealth than the bottom half of America, 150 million people? Who in America thinks that it is acceptable that one family, the Walton family of Walmart, now owns more wealth than the bottom 40% of the American people? Now, by the way, when you talk about the Walton family and you talk about Walmart, let me just mention something. All of you have heard many of my Republican friends talking about welfare abuse. They're very concerned about welfare abuse and people ripping off the system. Guess who the biggest welfare recipient in America is? God, this is such a smart audience. I know we're going to win this election with all of